Dark Souls is arguably the most influential game of the last decade, if not ever. Everywhere you look, it's the Dark Souls of Zelda, of Metroid, of Crash Bandicoot, of Witcher 3, of dating sims and of journalists trying to come up with interesting titles without resorting to cheap goading. When asked, why do you like it so much, people usually say, it's the combat. Everyone have heard of it, everyone has their shitty little opinion on it, but the second most mentioned thing about Souls is probably exploration. Last decade was full of garbage empty open worlds with terrible gameplay with many more to come. Soulless, you could say. What if we could get Elder Crit of the Wild, but with Souls gameplay? Miyazaki is no stranger to experiments. Dark Souls, but fucking still not on PC. Dark Souls, but a rhythm game. How about the Elden Scrolls? An open-world Souls game was practically destined to happen, yet the wait was long, and it took quite a lot of trade-offs to get there. Take for instance the instances or dungeons. Large chunks are reused and recycled, and I'm not even talking just meshes or textures, whole geometry cells. From's games always stood out with how unreasonably detailed their levels are. Every room was unique. Unfortunately, in Elden Ring, with few rare exceptions, I'd be hard-pressed to tell apart one dungeon from another. A game of such size inherently makes it impractical, making everything distinct. It's a common and reasonable practice of saving size, effort, time and money, and measured against some platonic ideal image, the line has to be drawn somewhere. But to me, it is in a wrong spot. The few old-style, intricate and interconnected levels that got the most attention were branded as legacy dungeons, as if it's something they've moved on from. This game isn't about intertwining paths, instead it's about repeated rooms and getting mad at imps for not having a blunt weapon. There is a dungeon in the game that embraces this idea and has multiple repeating floors with identical layout, and I really like to think it's some self-reflecting meta-joke. Skyrim dungeons suffered from the same issues, but they were easier to tolerate because the bar wasn't set so high by previous games. The practice of reusage is also applied to bosses, including some major plot bosses. The game has 165 boss encounters. Did the game really need them all? I was upset about repeated bosses in Sekiro, but if that was padding, then Elden Ring is more inflated than Sonic fanfiction, and I don't mean the amount of it. Quality over quantity was synonymous with From, but the priority seemingly shifted to the point of using regular enemies as bosses. While on the topic of bosses and core values, they really could do without putting double bosses everywhere. It's almost like they're trying to cater to the outside image that From's game have. That boss sure was hard, wasn't it? What if you, hypothetically speaking, would fight two of them together? Wouldn't it be such a Souls thing? Would it? Or how From's games are known for the poison swamps, to the point where Miyazaki was even asked about them in an interview. Wouldn't it be such a From thing if the game would have like 5 of those swamps? It's as if the focus shifted to fitting into the media image of what Souls games are, instead of defining said image, getting defined by it. But no, From would never do such a thing. They would never turn into yet another soulless corpo that overworks their employees and traded quality for financial success. Elden Ring improved its RPG elements, and it's probably the biggest leap they've ever made. You can now put almost any infusion on almost any weapon, and most weapon arts can be transferred, so you're no longer locked into shitty weapons if they happen to have a cool move. Quite a step up from special moves on strong attacks that would also drain durability. Durability is finally fucking gone, by the way. They finally let it go and razored it away. Maybe the double bosses will be gone too, hopefully. Rings or talismans also got some love. There is so many more now, and a lot of them have actually useful applications. They also took lessons from a better Souls game, Dark Souls 2, and doubled down on gear that provides various bonuses. On top of that, there are numerous buffs that you can stack on yourself. Coupled with numeric stuff, they've added some mechanical changes. Since you can jump now, they've introduced useful jumping attacks and made posture breaking more meaningful now, so you can make solid builds around both of them. This is all wonderful. There are so many various playstyles, and pretty much all of them are viable now. Even consumables aren't a complete meme anymore. If you're stuck on a boss, you probably have a solution in your inventory. In this regard, Elden Ring is much more RPG than any other Souls-like. This, in return, also means that Elden Ring is much more about the numbers, and this is by far my biggest gripe with it. I've long gone through the phase of caring about how other people play these games. I really don't care whether you beat at Soul level 1 or cheat engine at max level and use 20 summons. Souls always had the RPG aspect, but in my mind it was action orientated first and RPG second. And over the years, in my head I formed this idealized image of how it's all about the dodges and timings, and how it all should be overcome with mastery. This is my way of enjoying Souls games. People picked up on this change, and YouTube is filled with the most OP builds. Buddy, I don't want to obliterate the boss, that's exactly the opposite. The fight itself, the dance, the flow, and the rhythm and the mastery that comes with it. This is what I want. This is what puts the soul in the Souls-like for me. It also doesn't help that spectacle was seemingly one of the priorities making some of the bosses, to the point of complete disregard of how they will actually play out. It looks really cool when the boss blows up the entire arena, but the best solution you have is just running around. I really like how my favorite franchise, focused on intricate combat, gets reduced to shitty area of denial attacks, or how the boss stands up with their weapon up and waits until second coming to swing it down. Fuck it, let's undress the boss and give her a pair of wings that constantly spawn butterflies so you can't see shit as she spins around. All of this looks hella fucking cool, and if I would be a real snob essayist, I'd comment how it innovates the flow of combat and subverts the established norms to freshen out the player experience, but frankly, it's just fucking annoying. And to deal with all of this 24/7 spew of visual clutter and bad telegraphs bullshit, you have all the aforementioned options to help you out. Outnumbered? Summon. Can't avoid the damage? Tank through and outheal. Not dealing enough damage? Pick between 20 of your own bullshit options. The game really is balanced around the concept of, if everything is OP, nothing really is. All of my troubles are a skill issue and can be overcome, but there is a merit to how much annoyance one can tolerate. Everyone has their own line to draw, but for me, once again, it's not there. I know how cursed it is to talk about difficulty around Souls, yet I think Elden Ring is quite hard if you refuse all the tools that are given to you. And not all of this challenge is quote-unquote fair and interesting. You have many resources to tap into, but to take that help means compromising my principles. So I'd have to pick between those or fighting the annoyances of the game, and it's a really sad place to be in. The game, however, isn't made for me, and the versatility of playstyles and options allows it to be enjoyed by many people in many ways, which is a good thing. Talking to friends and strangers as I was playing through really opened up my eyes how differently everyone plays it. I've talked to people who find spending hours on Radon without summons bizarre, just as it is bizarre to me to not do that. And it's fine, my playstyle isn't in any way superior. I mean, of course it is superior because it's mine and based, but the lesser minds should have fun too. Not everyone has the time, stubbornness and reflexes they can afford, and that's alright. The ocean of options lets you essentially customize the difficulty of the game for yourself, where you can make it harder for yourself if you so desire, or take the help you need. But on the higher end, it is very difficult to ignore the over-reliance on the numbers and how it may conflict with player intention. The focus on spectacle does the game a much greater service with regards to exploration, which is easily the greatest thing about the game. Souls always had a strong art direction, and the Elden Ring elevates it once again. While dungeons are as dull as it gets, the Otherworld and Underworld areas have simply immaculate visuals. From also made a decision to introduce background music to the levels, which usually was reserved for just the bosses and a few very special occasions. While the lack of BGM isn't what made Souls Souls, it was one of many unique things that stood out about the games, and I wonder if it's a sign of prioritizing mass appeal and doing things just like the others, or I'm reading too much into this. Nonetheless, it does a good job of setting the moody atmosphere, similar to how it's done in Skyrim. It's really easy to compare two games, because the main drive of exploration is the same. Skyrim was sold on the premise that if you see something, you can probably go there, and the premise is sure a good one, since it almost makes you forget how bad the dungeons and gameplay are. Elden Ring is much the same. The desire to find out what's the thing in the distance got me pogging throughout the game. The thought of exploring new cool zones and finding new exciting gear while wondering about the world and environment. This theme was always present in From's games, and is just as important as the combat. But now done on a massive scale of a huge world, and for how experimental it is, From did an outstanding job of getting it right. I think Skyrim with better combat is a much better description to Elden Ring than Souls but open world. Case in point, the vadded fucking crafting of all things. A staple of pointless open world mechanics, and yet another thing that Souls were unique for not having. And just as with many other games, it's just as impactless and easy not to engage with. Crafting could be argued for as a logical conclusion to the ever-growing amount of consumables, but what definitely is in dire need of an upgrade is the upgrading system itself. Numerous people pointed out how upgrading somber weapons is easier and faster than the normal ones, but even if that would be fixed, you are still extremely limited in how many ornaments you can play with. All the variety of playstyles and the flexibility of infusions and weapon arts is nullified by having to upgrade every ornament individually. You find a new cool weapon, but you probably can't upgrade it to the same level as your main one. It's risky to upgrade the weapon, because you can't judge the damage and scaling without committing, and if Extra Life Wiki is less reliable than AAA studios with their release dates. To top it off, the key items that let you purchase Infinity Stones are easily missable, and 2 of them are unavailable until the last area of the game. You find a lot of upgrades naturally, far more than any other From game, but you also find more weapons that you want to try. This has to be changed. Maybe your weapons could get stronger as you progress through the game, same way as you get talisman slots, or maybe the upgrades could be scaled off of your level, or maybe just have them scale based on stats only. Obviously, all of these options are flawed too, but something has to be done. It's very hard to invest into anything new because of the associated costs and risks. The game is big, maybe too big even, especially if you do everything. But by the time I felt I got everything out of my build and felt confidence to reroll, the game was essentially over. It would be crazy to ask for even more dull dungeons, but I feel really smart about coming up with it, so here's my pitch. What if Elden Ring had an endless dungeon system akin to Bloodborne? It could become perfect testing grounds for new builds. It would also serve as an endgame for those who would rather reroll and try a new character than bother with New Game Plus. The way dungeons are constructed in the main game is already very close to Bloodborne dungeons. The assets seem to be perfectly designed to be recombined and matched with each other to create procedural content. The dungeons could also drop upgrades and provide the means of rerolling. Hell, go wild with the concept. It could be a standalone mode like Trials in FF12, where it uses your main character's stats, but it's played separately. Or you could even go full roguelike with it. Free DLC idea from. Lastly, I'd want to talk about the quests. These are again a level higher than what From have created before. Whether it's George Martin's involvement and him creating a coherent setting or not, but this time I was under impression that I understood more about what's going on than usually. Still not a whole lot, but self-gaslighting is one of my favorite recreational activities. The characters also seem more real, elaborate, and don't feel so distant, mostly because they don't constantly bring you down. From's games were never remotely horny, with like 2 exceptions, but it had never stopped the kummers, and From seemingly caved in one more time and added a little bit more fanservice to the game. There is a little bit for everyone, something for feet appreciators, something for furries, and also something for cultured people. Normally I'd be above these, but I've been simping for women in pointy hats for over a decade, so no mom, it's not just a phase. Ranni's questline is by far the most drawn-out, complex, interesting and rewarding plotline ever put in Souls. It's also intertwined with Blythe's questline. I really like his character, but his questline not so much. Meeting him requires a set of almost arbitrary events to occur, under assumption you went through the correct areas in the correct order and spoken to proper NPCs when needed. Same with him disappearing later on, or other questlines like Gold Mask and White Masks. Thankfully, pretty much all questlines are impossible to fail, and you can continue them later, albeit at the cost of potentially missing on some dialogue. A long step up from failing a questline if you didn't summon the NPC at the correct boss fight, but still miles to go. Around release of the game, there was a picture making rounds, mocking other big games with their excessive handholding with map markers and other things. Naturally, this is not what I'd want from the game, but as of now, you don't even know if you're missing out on something. Elden Ring is a grandiose undertaking by From. It was the most anticipated game for 2 years, and yet they managed to deliver, despite making mostly the same game for the 10th time. Practically a miracle of living up to the expectations in the current market. Elden Ring took creative risks to provide a familiar yet different experience. It is testament to From's skill and a bold stand in a sea of mediocrity, aggressive advertisements, constant remasters, misleading promises and thoughtless consumers. A grand success on most accounts. The game took many systems to a next step. Expanded combat, better RPG elements, broader exploration, even more exquisite visuals. But it also takes a set of deliberate trade-offs to get there. Minor on their own, but the emerging tendency is concerning. Earliest Souls titles were niche, but that's what made them personal. Elden Ring, in its mass success and the steps it took to get there, lost some of its charm. And from the point of love for Souls for its action, the elevated focus on numerical RPG elements is not the direction I'd like to see the series going. Yet after seeing how many people are so happy with the game, maybe I should let it go and appreciate Elden Ring for what it is instead of what I want it to be.